I will during this break.
Ooh,
That-
I mean,
We're
it's not
not
working.
We're making our team project game. Great job.
I was thinking of doing some music stuff, but yeah, we'll see.
Okay, actually, that's actually a good point to bring up for class. If you want to get ahead a little bit of your team project stuff and experiment with some things, go for it, but please don't work the entire break. You don't get a lot of breaks in between terms here at VFS, so it's good to kind of rest and recharge, play some games, have some fun, catch up on, I don't know, the dozens of hours of sleep that you've probably accumulated. Question?
Do you know if are we gonna be able to access to Citrix, because we are gonna move to another classroom?
Yeah, so Citrix might be up at some point. I don't know when. You're going to be moving. Yeah, I think you're probably moving to 302 next term.
Yeah.
So IT should set up the Citrix connections, but I don't know when they're wiping all the PCs. It's probably going to start next week. I'm not 100% sure there. So you can try it. If it connects, you should be okay. But I'm not sure when that stuff is going to go up.
I was also curious.
Yeah.
You know, since I have a few things that I'd like to leave here for next term,
Yeah.
is there a place I could leave them?
Um.
Or am I able to rent a locker for 2 weeks?
Oh, you could probably ask for a locker. Yeah, you could do that. I think that's probably the safest thing to do.
Yeah.
You could leave stuff in here. I think normally they kind of clean out the classrooms when students are moving.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't really trust it.
Yeah.
You could probably hide a few things in like the cupboard in the kitchen and the student area too, but I don't know if you want to leave stuff in there. So.
Don't leave anything in their classrooms. I see this with every term, like things end up getting lost and they don't find it in lost and found. It's better just carry everything back home.
Yeah.
Thank you, buddy.
Okay, so we're going to get started for today. I've had a lot of questions about where to source assets and where to find stuff. So I think we're going to spend most of today just looking at different places we can grab assets for Team Project and look at how we can bring them into the engine. So we'll fire up our old projects here. And I think we'll probably play around with getting some models in as well. Anyone brave enough to give me some assets from Maya for me to import into the engine as a demo?
I can give you my card that I made for my assessment.
Sure.
You want a Mega Man?
Mega Man would be fantastic, actually.
There's no
Don't
rigging.
send my Mega Man though.
So no rigging is fine. I actually don't want rigging.
Send the shittest mega.
That would be fine. That would be fine.
Can I send you a zip file?
Yeah, or just throw it onto Discord. It should be small enough.
All right.
Sure, let's actually start with bringing some models in. And there's a few tricks that are really useful for bringing in specifically animated characters, so I'll kind of show you that stuff as well. So you've probably heard of it. Some of you probably haven't actually been here yet, but the site we kind of recommend you go to get animations for humanoid characters is this site called Mixamo. It's free. You just have to log in with an Adobe account. You can use any Adobe account you want. If it's your VFS one, I think that's okay, or a personal one, anything should work.
I was curious, Quinn.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to animate for our team projects at all?
Yes. In fact, depending on what you do, you might have to.
So we don't have to use this?
Do not have to, no, but it's a huge head start.
Okay.
FBX, yeah, you always want to export stuff as an FBX. So I've logged into Mixamo here. Now this is something most of you have probably done visiting different sites, but you'll notice I am getting a fantastic slideshow frame rate right now. That is because Chrome, specifically on the PCs, we've been begging IT for years to turn on hardware acceleration by default, but it's not turned on. So if you find, and this will be basically reset every time the PCs are wiped, but if you're getting a really bad frame rate on sites like Mixamo through Chrome, make sure you go to your preferences. So if you hit the three little dots in Chrome and go down to settings, you can look for, I usually just look for Excel, and you'll find this option. This use hardware acceleration when available. You want to make sure that's turned on. It'll get you to restart Chrome, but that will allow you to use hardware acceleration, and you'll get a much better frame rate. And I'll throw that into your 72 channel here. And I've got a stream going, so this might kill my YouTube stream. We will find out.
Are you not streaming from OBS?
I'm streaming from OBS through or I'm streaming on Discord, and I'm streaming from OBS to YouTube as well.
Should be fine.
Looks like I'm still live. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, so once that's on, you should see a much better frame rate in Mixamo. And even though Mixamo has a Remember Me option, I've never seen it work ever. There we go. So we can check this out. So Mixamo has a bunch of different characters and different animations we can use, but we probably want to get the animations on your characters. Now, Riley was brave enough to put Mega Man in your channel here. So if you want to follow along, that's great. We're going to download this FBX. We're going to throw it into Mixamo. All right, let's see what we're working with here. Okay, so we've got our character ready to go. In Mixamo, what we're going to do is we're going to hit the upload character button. We're going to drag in our character and then upload it to Mixamo. Yeah.
So we log into Adobe ID because it says school account.
Oh, you can just go like personal, I believe, or unless it's not giving you that option. Yeah, let's see, what does it give you for options? Oh, what do you even let you? Yeah, so
I
you
do have my own.
yeah. So if it's not letting you use your VFS one, just use your own personal Adobe account then. Kind of goofy. I don't know why it's not a paid service anyway, so I don't know why they even care, but
Tracking data.
yeah, I mean, it's probably tracking. Maybe for corporate accounts, they have some paid Mixamo service too. I'm not sure. But to get our character in here, we're going to click on upload, and we can just drag our FBX in here. Should upload pretty quick, fairly small size.
Eyes look scary.
Nice. Oh yeah, that's kind of horrifying. Cool. So you got your character in like an A pose here, so it looks pretty good. We can then use Mixamo to basically drag different anchor points onto the character, and it's going to auto rig your character. Now, for standard like A-posed humanoid characters without a lot of extra stuff, like when they don't have wings or tails or skirts or anything like that, it works fairly well. If you're going to do any like cloth robes or anything like that, we have a team in the 71s trying to do that right now. Mixamo isn't so happy with that. You'll also find if you have extra stuff like that, for instance, like a robe on a character, if it auto rigs it and it works, it's still not going to look great because it's going to rig your cloth like bones. So when you're running, you're going to get that like old PS2 style animation where like the skirt's stuck to the legs. Other options there are you can go in and do things like blend shapes to animate the robe. Or you could even just keep that as a separate mesh, and you could set that up using like Cloth Sim or something like that in Unity. Unity's Cloth Sim, the editor getting it working is a little janky, but the system does actually work quite well. So if you want to add like capes or banners or anything else that's kind of simulated through cloth, it's pretty good. So sorry, question? Nope, okay. We've got our character dragged in here. We can go and we can look around. We can rotate. Looks pretty good. Nice. We'll go next. And then we can go and rig the character. So we can drag all these markers on. They're mirrored. So I can get the character's chin. I can go on to wrists. Elbow. Is his elbow in the glove? A little above, like there.
Yeah, like that.
Your knees. And the groin. So we throw all those anchor points on. And you can select which skeleton. We're going to use just the standard 65 bone skeleton here. And we're going to hit next. Now this takes a little bit depending on the detail in your mesh, the number of faces and everything. It can take quite a while. But it's going to go through and it's going to auto rig the character. It should start playing an animation on it, and usually it does a pretty good job of this if your character is, you know, pretty much humanoid shaped. If your character is going to have any other bones, so obviously clothing I mentioned, you might want to do like a cloth sim for that. For things like tails, wings, other appendages, a few different ways of doing it. You can obviously hand animate everything from scratch, but that's a lot of work. You can also rig things through Mixamo, export the animation, and then you can go in and animate just that body part through something like Maya. Or depending on what the appendage is, if it's like a tail, you could even make use of something like IK in Unity to basically just procedurally animate the tail and not have to do any animation there. We can kind of look at that on like a per game basis if anyone runs into that problem next turn. So we can see once it's done, the character actually looks pretty good.
Well done, Riley.
Yeah.
That's you.
Thank you.
Now, this is also a good example of something that was exported well. So I'm sure Jeff has talked about this, but with characters, our pivot is always in between the feet. So when we're standing on like height 0, we're right against the ground. There's nothing extraneous that was exported either. I've seen some students, their 6-foot man is like stuck to the character off to the side because they forgot to remove it when they exported. You also want to be careful. Unity will import lights and cameras into your game as well if they're still in your scene and you have them selected when you export. So make sure you don't drag that stuff in as well. We had one game that was having really bad performance problems, and it took them a while to realize that their character had multiple cameras attached to it, so they're rendering their game like 5 times over. So you don't want to do that. Once we're happy with how our auto rig looks, we can hit next. And we'll go proceed with our new character. He's going to idle, but we can select any animations to try things out. Cool. Looks pretty good. Now, depending on the game you're making, you might need kind of any number of animations. We have a few top-down shooters in the works right now. I believe most of yours, you're able to move in one direction and shoot in another. So for that scenario, you're going to have to get quite a few different animations for your character. Typically, the way we do that is using something called a blend tree in Unity. And we're actually going to use a blend tree next term in our coding classes. But basically, we can blend between 8 different directional movement plus your idle to properly kind of blend through different animation states as your character moves. To make things a little bit easier, they do have, I think if you search for pack, they actually have some packs of different collections of stuff. They have like a basic shooter pack. So if you go here, sorry?
Yours don't look too good with the rifle.
Yeah. You can go in and you can basically download like a whole pack of animations. I don't really use the packs a whole lot. Typically I download things kind of one at a time. So for instance, I can go in and I'll just look for a generic idle. There we go. They do have some additional stuff you can turn on. You'll notice he's kind of sticking his arms against his body. To speed animations up, you can turn this overdrive up and down to speed it up or slow it down. If your character needs some more space with his arms, you can also turn up this character arm space, which will kind of force the arms out more sideways. You go from 50 to 60, looks a little bit better, a little more natural, maybe 65. Yeah, it's a little bit of a weird pose, but we'll use it for now. Now, when we want to download and use this character in Unity, we need to make sure we use the right export settings. So in order to reduce the amount of duplicate stuff in your project, typically what I do is I have like a single kind of idle animation for my character. You could use like an idle if you want. You could even just go, and maybe we'll do this for the first one. We'll go and just grab the T-pose of our character. So this one is going to be just our standard T-pose. This character is going to be rigged, but it's not really going to have much of an animation on it. And we're going to bring it in with the skin. When we go and want to bring in more animations for our character, we can download just the animation data because we don't really need to drag the skin along with it. We don't need like 20 different copies of Mega Man attached to different animations. We just need one copy of his skin. So on this first T-pose one, I'm going to click on download. And I'm going to leave it set to FBX binary, but I'm going to switch it to FBX for Unity. That's going to make sure that all the axes are correct. Keep in mind that Unreal and Unity use different axes, so I believe the standard FBX binary will work with Unreal, and for Unity, you want to use the FBX for Unity. In this first one, where we want to include the skin of our character, I'm going to leave with skin turned on. I'll leave the animation at 30 FPS, and I'm not going to do any keyframe reduction or anything like that. When we are happy, we're going to click on download. Now, another thing Mixamo does, when you go and download this, it actually names it properly. So what we always want to do with Unity, because it makes our lives a lot easier, is we want to follow this convention here. And I'll type it out in your class chat. So Unity Animation Naming Convention. We want to use the character name at animation name .fbx. What this does in Unity is it understands that this at is splitting apart the character name and the animation, and it's going to properly and automatically name all of our animation clips correctly in Unity using this animation name here. Makes our lives way easier. If we were to just call this like Mega Man and import it, any animation attached to it, it would call mixamo.com. It wouldn't name it correctly. So you might be dragging in a whole bunch of different animations, and I've seen students do this, and they're trying to create like an animation state graph, and all their animations are just called mixamo.com, which makes things way more confusing. So I'm going to call this Mega Man at T-pose. And then we can try dragging it into Unity. So just to keep things organized, I've still got our recording stuff here. Just to keep things organized, inside our assets here, I'm just going to make a folder called Art. And inside that, I'm going to make a folder called Mega Man. And importing meshes and characters and all this stuff into Unity is pretty easy. All we're going to do is drag the file directly from wherever it is in our File Explorer into our project inside the folder. So I'm just going to drag my Mega Man T-pose directly into Unity. And oh, this is a good opportunity to look at the scale too. Let's see how your scale did.
Judge you harshly, right?
That's not bad. How tall is Mega Man supposed to be?
1.52 meters.
He's kind of short, right? Let's see. That looks pretty good to me. Well done. So one thing I want to mention is, artists, your job doesn't end at stuff getting into the engine. You are responsible for how your art looks and feels, from creating it in Maya all the way to the end user looking at it on the screen. So make sure you have kind of control over your art assets throughout the whole pipeline. Don't rely on someone else, particularly a programmer, to make sure your art has been implemented correctly. That is your job. We've had some teams where they have artists just sending raw files to programmers to bring into the engine. I don't want to see any of that. I want to make sure that artists are bringing stuff into the engine themselves and double checking things like, for instance, here, the scale, making sure the scale is correct. We don't want to have a whole bunch of different assets at different scales, because that's going to make things very confusing to work with. And please, if your character is the wrong scale, don't just scale it up and do this. That's going to make a huge mess of things, because all your other assets are still going to be the wrong scale. If something's the wrong scale when you drag it in, fix it in Maya, re-export the thing, and bring it in again at the correct scale. Now we've got our here. We've got our character imported. Now, an important part of being able to reuse all the animations from Mixamo is we want to double check how our character has been imported. So we've got a few different tabs when we import it. We've got the model tab, got the rig, animation, and materials. For all of our characters we're bringing in from Mixamo that are humanoid, we want to make sure that they're imported using a humanoid rig. So on the rig tab, I'm going to go to the animation type. Currently it says generic. I'm going to change this to humanoid. This lets us reuse all those humanoid animations. Even if the characters have slightly different proportions or setups, we can still kind of use those animations interchangeably between different characters. So again, I'm going to switch the rig here over to humanoid. And I'm going to leave the avatar definition set to create from this model. So we're creating an avatar, essentially just a skeleton based on this character that we can reuse for our other animations. So once I switch it to humanoid, I'll hit apply. Now, everything should kind of go as planned. If you're curious about looking at how your avatar and your skeleton imported, we can click on this configure button right here. And we can take a look at it here. It looks like everything's green across the board. It's got all of his bones attached correctly. We're looking pretty good. So that was back here. Once you have the character set to humanoid and you hit apply, this configure button will turn on. Now, sometimes, depending on how the bones are set up, if they're not named correctly, sometimes it'll like mix up the left or right hand and you have to correct it. But mostly what I do in this, just to see if things are working correctly, is over in this muscle and settings tab, you can go and play with a bunch of different sliders to see how the skeleton moves. He is very flexible. And even did a pretty good job with the fingers. Nice. There we go. He's beautiful.
Shot in the back.
Yeah.
What about the jump animation?
Okay, so we now have a character that's been imported. The character set is humanoid. It's got a rig. It's got a skeleton. It's ready to go. We just need to apply some animations now. So now we can go pick out some animations in Mixamo as well. So we can go and grab whatever we want. Love some of the poses. Let's go. I'm gonna look for a dance. There's a few different dancing animations.
Please make him belly.
What is the Fortnite default dance?
The floss.
That is not default.
No, but
Floss
that's the
would go
floss.
crazy.
Okay, let's do belly dance.
Yeah.
I think there's a pretty good like capoeira one too.
Can people upload stuff to Mixamo?
I'm not sure where they actually source their animations from. I know the characters, at least some of them, have credits on them. The animations don't seem to, though, so I'm not sure where they're getting them from. I know there's a few different sites, too, that advertise stuff like being able to scan a video and generating an animation from just like a video of you in front of your phone. I've tried a few. None of them work well. But if you can find one in a good workflow, I'd love to see it. The one I tried, the animations didn't work like at all. A student did get one working and he sent me the site, but it was super sketchy where it was like, go to our site and sign up. Then it'll give you a link to Discord. Then you send us some money and then someone will send you a build of our like product through Discord. And I was like,
That's
nope,
not-
nope, nope.
Money.
And it seemed to work well for his animations. It was actually, what team was it? It was the Grim Keeper.
Maybe it's his site.
That'd be a pretty good grift.
While, but we finally made it. Together.
Yeah, this was a final project.
It's time. This was
This
why
is
we
final
did
project.
this. It is time for
Yeah.
you to move
So
on.
he, one artist did all the characters and art and animations for this.
Just
Yeah, he
little
was
more, Alistair.
he was a
We're
machine. I think it
nearly
was
there.
5 people.
Who's a good boy? Yes, you are.
Yeah, this is a final project.
Once one done making everything,
Yeah.
This is solo team project.
give us one artist.
Yeah, one artist.
One artist.
Yeah.
Awesome. He made this and fucking passed away. No.
I think it shows the final boss animation
I'm
too, which is
worried
pretty good.
about them too.
I bet he's not
I actually don't know where he's working right now.
because he seems like a great artist.
Oh yeah, here we go. This is a good one.
Bro, I thought you'd be like, yo.
Oh, it doesn't show it. It like rips its own head off and transforms into the final boss.
That's sick.
Why would they cut it off at the good for?
I know.
Yeah, they want you to play it. Boo!
Okay, so back to importing stuff. We've got our belly dance animation here. Just like before, I'm going to click on download. Except I'm going to, for this one, I don't need a copy of Mega Man again. We've already got Mega Man in our project. So the only difference here
Without
is, yeah, I'm going to go without skin. Which sounds horrifying, but it's what we want.
Skin Mega Man.
Yeah.
Like, you want your Mega Man with or without the shell?
Yeah. And we'll call this Mega Man at Belly Dance. Pretty great animation. All right. So just like before, all we're doing, we're just dragging the file right into Unity. Now, if you set things up right, we can basically have this animation just immediately target the Mega Man and reuse its skin and its skeleton. So rather than going in and setting this up to be a humanoid and creating the avatar from this model, this newly imported one, right now there's nothing previewing, we can't see any animation, nothing. In the rig tab, we're going to select humanoid again. And instead of create from this model, I'm going to go copy. So we're going to copy the avatar from the original we brought in. We can see we've got one. We should have one avatar per character. So there's one that exists from the Ybot already. But we're going to point this one at Mega Man. And I'll hit apply. And if you go to our preview, we can see our, go to the animation tab. We can see two things. We can preview the animation here. And you'll also notice that it's automatically called our animation clip Belly Dance Force. We don't have to go rename anything. It's just been imported correctly. Now, we can bring in any number of animations we want to set up like this. Got our belly dance here. I'm going to, as an example, I'm going to look for an idol. Maybe breathing idol. He looks a little bit more alive here. There we go. So same thing. I'm going to download this without skin. I'm going to have a Mega Man at idle. I'll look for a walk. Oh, beautiful.
Sad, man. I picked the sad item. I didn't realize man was so sad.
Mega Man's got a lot of attitude. Oh my God, I would love to see a game with this walking speed.
Please add that one.
My Haunted House now.
You make Mega Man turn into like Schmeagle.
There is like a, what do they call it? There we go. Okay, this will be his run. So the demo I wanted to do, this isn't going to work as well as what I originally thought, but we'll still go through the process. So I'll call that Mega Man at run. So I've downloaded 3 animations now. I have an idle, a walk, and a run, and we can transition between them when we play our animation. This animation is pretty horrifying. I know T.A. Jordan did a game jam where she had to do a cat, so she didn't want to animate a like quadruped character, so she created a human-looking cat, dragged it in Mixamo, and then made it walk with this.
Wow.
It was nightmare fuel.
Was it working?
Yeah, I don't think it was, no. Okay, so we now have our idle, our walk, and our run. I'm going to bring these ones in. Now, one nice thing, I kind of did the first animation on its own. You can modify multiple animations at the same time. So if I want to hook up my idle, my run, and my walk at the same time, I can control click all of them and then go through the same process where I'm going to set the animation type on them to humanoid. And then I'm going to copy the avatar from Mega Man. There is an option here you'll see as well, just to point it out. On the original object that has your avatar, there's this option to optimize game objects, which will basically allow you to hide bones you're not interested in. So if you just want to have access to like the feet, the heads, and the hands, you can turn this on and then basically check off which bones you actually want to expose, which can be nice for having a cleaner hierarchy. But if you want to go and start parenting things to bones, or if you want to use any sort of like IK to have procedural animation, you can't use this feature. So I normally don't turn this on by default. But just in case you see, like in my example Ybot, I have this turned on, so a bunch of stuff is hidden. That's how I'm doing it. Okay, so we now have our animations here. We have our idle. We have our walk. And we have our run. Now, one important thing after we bring in these animations is setting them up correctly with the right import settings. And again, on the art side, you should be in charge of this. Don't rely on the programmers to do it for you. So all these animations here are looping. We want them to kind of go from the start to the end and loop around back at the beginning again without stopping the animation. So inside the animation tab here, anything that's looping, I'm going to go down and turn on loop time. If you want the pose to match so there's no snap at the end, you can turn on this loop pose option and it'll automatically move the bones slightly if they don't perfectly line up to create a properly looping animation. So I usually turn on both of these. And then we can scroll down and hit apply. So any animations we want to have looping, we need to make sure we turn those on.
There was an animations.
Yeah, so when you click on the animation file here, you'll find that in the animation tab up top. So make sure these are all looping.
Make sure that they're all looping. There's just one button.
Yeah, so I'm turning on loop time and loop pose. So when I say they're all looping, I mean each file. Like the idle, run, walk, these are all looping animations. So I'm... Unfortunately, no. When you control click them, it turns that off. I really wish they had that option. If you want to get really into it, there are some things you can do. Unity allows you to script certain import processes. So you could do something like if you add like an L on the end of the animation name, it'll turn on looping automatically. But that gets a little bit more complex. So that will get them all looping. Now, another thing to consider with your animations, and it depends on what you're going to be animating, but you'll see options in here for root transform, position, rotation, all this stuff. And all this is relating to something called root motion. The root motion is the ability for the animator to have the animation drive the movement of the character. This kind of depends on how you want your game to be built. The advantages of root motion is everything is kind of perfectly timed. In most games, when we play like a walk cycle, even though when you, as a person, are kind of walking, your gait kind of changes how fast you're moving. You don't move at the same speed completely like robotically as you walk forward. If you use root motion, the animator can kind of control that, so you're actually landing on your feet and pushing with each feet through each step. The disadvantage of it is if you want to speed your character up and still have everything line up, you have to go and edit the animation. It can also lead to some animations that don't feel great. Did anyone play The Witcher 3 when it like very first came out?
You should control like a horse.
Yeah, exactly. So The Witcher 3, when it first launched, all their movement was animation based. And I had trouble even like picking up items off the ground because you'd like push forward on the stick and you wouldn't move until you went far enough, and then you'd take like a huge step. And if you tried to turn, you do the same thing. And I remember there was like something on a barrel to my right, and I was trying to just turn to pick it up. And he kept taking these big steps forward, and I was just walking in circles around the barrel. Like it was like driving a car trying to get to this thing. So if I wanted to pick up a specific item, I had to turn and walk away and do a big loop and then like run at the thing forward. It was really goofy. So root animation is really good in some situations, not so great in others. For standard kind of movement stuff, just like doing locomotion from A to B, normally we want to have it turned on. For specific animations, particularly cutscenes when characters are like interacting with stuff in the environment, or even like canned animations like attacks. A good example would be something like Dark Souls, where they actually take steps forward during their attacks and move and shift their feet around. Root motion can be really good for that stuff. If we want to see it working, I believe some of these actually have root motion in place. Yeah, this one's actually moving, so we can actually check it out. So if we want to set up the animation for our character, our next step is we look at Mega Man. We can just drag him into any scene here. I'm actually going to move him way back, so he's over here because he's going to move forward. So in any scene, if we click on Mega Man, you'll notice he has this animator component. So this is sort of like the player that drives his animations. Have you done any animation stuff in your Unity 1 class yet? For 2D? Okay, so the cool thing about animation in Unity is 2D and 3D, the animation system is the same. We still use an animator and an animator controller. 3D is just a little bit more complex because we have to worry about some more factors. So to get our character animating, we need to make an animator controller for him. So down in the same folder, I've got the rest of the assets. I'm going to right click and go create, and I'm going to make an animator controller, which is down here near the bottom. All right, so we're going to make our animator controller. And I'll just call it Mega Man. I'll double click the animator controller to go inside of it. And we have our basic graph. We just want to get one animation going. We can drag any of our animations on here. I think just for fun, I'm going to drag on my belly dance. And that's just going to play the belly dance automatically. We had set our belly dance to looping, so it's just going to automatically loop through the belly dance forever until we tell it to stop. The last thing we need to do to make sure it's playing correctly is on Mega Man himself, we need to plug that controller in. So on the animator, we can either use the select button here and look for Mega Man, or we can go and just drag Mega Man, the animator controller, directly into the controller field here. And if we hit play, there he goes. Now, you'll notice he's actually moving around. He's not like standing completely in place and animating. He's actually moving around with his feet, and that is that root motion. So another good example would be something like a dance. I would lose my mind if an animator was like, hey, I didn't do any root motion. Can you just script him moving around perfectly with his dance? That would be miserable. So that's another good example of where we might want to have root motion turned on. If we go and turn that root motion option off, which is just on the animator here, and hit play again, you notice the difference. So his root isn't moving, he's still animating, so you can see his feet slipping around and sliding because he's not actually moving properly. So depending on the animation, you might want to have this on or off.
I'm sorry, I put a dance into my Mega Man.
Yep.
I connected it, but it's not.
Let's see.
Controller.
Let's double check.
That's fine.
Oh yeah, actually hit play. Yeah. I think there's yeah, try this. Check it. Yeah, we're not driving the camera. Just hit play. It's flipping over the.
I mean, I can't move my. I can't move.
Yeah, it's because you're in the game. Play. Yeah. So if you're not able to move your camera around, remember we don't have any movement or anything in this scene. Mega Man's not hooked up to move. So what I did to move my camera around there is I hit play, and I'm just going back to the scene tab here. Now I can see what's going on. For animations, your team project, I like to keep things fairly simple. In the code stream next term, we're going to go over animations for basically a top-down shooter. In term 4 in the code stream, I go over more complex animation where we actually hook up like a melee combat system that goes through a few different attacks. But that's quite a bit more complex to set up. Now, one thing I like to show early on, just so students don't get in the habit of doing this, we get this nonsense where they're like, okay, I'm gonna have a belly dance, I'm gonna have an idle, a walk, and a run. I'm gonna drag all these on, and then I'm just gonna start putting transitions everywhere, and I'm gonna make my life a living hell. So we want to avoid that. There's some really bad examples of this. If you look, just look up Unity Animator. Even some of their examples, yeah, stuff like this is just awful. Good luck going back and fixing this, or, you know, God forbid you hand this off to some other poor soul. You want to avoid this scenario. So specifically for movement, they got here, they have an idle, they have a crouch, they have a move. They've got all this stuff that could actually be combined into into a single state with different controls. So just as an example of what we can do, I'm going to delete these extra ones. We can use something called a blend tree to blend between animations, and it makes our lives way easier. So in the animator tab, I'm going to go over to parameters here, this button right here, and we're going to add a new parameter that can control Mega Man's speed. So once I'm in the parameter tab, I'm going to click plus and create a new float parameter. And I'm going to call this parameter speed. Now, to create a blend tree, rather than just dragging a whole bunch of animations onto our graph, I'm going to right click and go create state and go from new blend tree.
When?
Yeah,
What did we create again? Was it a?
created a float.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, for controls, we have float, we have int. So float's useful for like speed, setting different direction values. Int we can use to like select things like you're doing a sword attack, which particular attack animation are you playing? Bool's pretty simple on-off stuff for like is grounded, is alive, is dead. Triggers are a little bit more complex. They're kind of like bools, except they get consumed. So you turn it on, and at some point the graph will use it later.
Okay.
Well, we'll dig more into these next term. Now, the cool thing about the animator here with blend trees is we have blend trees. We also have things like substates we can create. You can actually go inside of them. So once I create my blend tree, I'm going to double click it and I go inside the blend tree. You can see up at the top, it gives us a little cookie crumb trail. We get a base layer and then blend tree. So if I want to go back up again, I can just click on base layer. Now, the nice thing about this is our blend tree is going to have our idle, our run, and our walk all put together inside one node. So if we need to transition from something like our locomotion here, from our blend tree to maybe attacking or dying or jumping, we just have one transition rather than having like idle to jump, walk to jump, run to jump. We can eliminate all that nonsense. Now, the system's pretty smart. It's automatically selected speed as our blend, but we don't have any animations hooked up to it. So you can see poor Mega Man is just stuck in the floor. What we're going to do is we're going to add motions to our blend tree. So over on the right-hand side, you'll see this list of motions that's currently empty. I'm going to hit the plus button on the bottom and go add motion field. And I'm going to do that 3 times. If you want to get more complex, you can actually have a blend tree that goes into a blend tree, which starts to get pretty crazy, but it's useful for things like we had way back, a team used that in a lot of different places. Do you remember what that was called? Tokyo, was it Tokyo Takeover? Yeah, that was it. It was like a stealth game, and they had characters that could, you could crouch and you could also lean against a wall. Depending on the height of the wall, they would change your height. So if you're up against a full wall, the character would stand up just leaning against the wall. And they had it set up so if you started moving along a wall that got shorter, your character would actually crouch lower as you went further down the wall. So they had blend trees leading into blend trees to create that behavior. So over in the right-hand side, click the plus button and go add motion field. Yeah, so we'll do that 3 times. From there, we can drag in motions or select them. Now, selecting them is a little bit tricky. If you have multiple characters in your project, you'll notice that if I click on the little selector button here, it shows animations, but I've got like 2 walks. Because one is from the Y-Bot and one is from Mega Man. So it's not super clear which one is which. So often for this, I like to drag the animation in instead. So we can actually just grab them from down here on our assets. Now, the tricky bit is that inside the asset, you'll actually find the clip. So if I, for instance, click on the little arrow beside idle, I'll see the idle animation clip, and I can drag that in. I kind of wish there was a more smooth way of doing this and plugging these in. Both of them are kind of annoying, either going through all your clips here or using the select option. Not a big fan of either. But I'll make sure each one I have in here, I'm going to have my Mega Man walk, my Mega Man idle, and my Mega Man run. Yes, it does. We're going to be blending from our idle to our walk to our run. Now, that's another good question. How you blend them is kind of up to you. Some people do it in like meters per second to kind of perfectly time the animation. So they'll say, okay, at 3.3 meters per second moving forwards, you're going to play this animation because I know the character's feet move at 3.3 meters per second. That's going to line up perfectly. Other times you might want to be a little bit lazy and just sort of normalize it and say, okay, at 0, I'm at idle. At 1, I'm at a full sprint. At 0.5, I'm like jogging, and you can kind of put them together that way. Sort of up to you. If you want to see the behavior working, it's actually ready to go. If I click play down here, you can see Mega Man start to idle. And this speed value here is actually a slider. If we start to slide it up, you'll see him go from one animation to the other. Now, it's going to blend them together. So going from like our walk at 0.5 looks fine. It's trying to blend like the middle point in between that like sassy walk and the run on the ground, which is going to look kind of goofy. The more similar your animations are, the better this is going to look. Yeah, there we go. Super normal walk animation.
That's just how I walk.
Funny, right? That's funny.
When you're saying this, is it how you walk? Normal?
I mean, this is pretty normal. There we go. Now, if you want to test this while the game is running, to hook this up to gameplay, we're going to need a programmer to go and set up the actual code side of things. But if we want to test things really quick while the game's running, we can actually hit play. Our character is going to initialize. Oh, sorry, I forgot one more step. So back in the base layer, you'll notice that our belly dance is currently orange. This means this is our default state. So we actually don't have any transition into our blend tree here. It's never happening. We want our blend tree to be our default. We can right click on it and go set as layer default state. So it's going to start in the blend tree. That'll have our character playing our blend tree. He's just going to stand idling first. And if we want, we can go in. I'm going to drag the animator tab out here. And when I have him selected, as I turn his speed up, he'll start playing the animations.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it looks a little bit janky. We can go and fix that. If I turn on root motion, he's going to start moving too. Beautiful.
Can we see it at 0.75?
See what?
Can we see it at 0.75?
0.75, sure. I'll turn root motion on. Let's see how that looks. He's like crawling on the air.
Oh my god.
Also, bye.
Cool. Okay. We'll look at correcting some of the issues we had with the animations, but it's already 2 o'clock. Let's take a break until like 2:10. When we get back, we'll fix some of the weird issues he had where he was kind of like turning sideways while he was animating. We'll take a look at correcting that. Yes.
For the root movement stuff,
Yeah.
because if you're wanting to have like when you walk forward, then the animation plays, you wouldn't have the root motion, right? Would you?
It could be either. It depends how you want your character to move.
Okay.
Typically for motion, I don't, because I want the player to be in full control of the
Yeah.
motion. If you have root motion turned on, you kind of have to wait for the animation to transition and start moving in another direction.
Okay.
It also, depending on how many animations you have, might not have enough to move in the
Yeah.
exact direction the player wants to.
Okay. So would you say the root motion is more for stuff that the player isn't in control of?
Yeah,
Basically?
yeah.
Okay. Okay. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
things are like death and attacking and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There's some more complex ways of doing animations too. Like I know for stuff like Assassin's Creed and Spider-Man, instead of using a graph like this, they use what they call motion matching, which is they put in like thousands of animations into this graph and then control it with a bunch of different variables. They basically say, okay, I need like for Spider-Man, I need like his hands up here and his legs up. And
Oh,
it
okay. So they
finds,
have like a separate thing for
yeah, it kind of finds the animations that fit there.
I mean,
But you need like
trying to make
2,000 animations
Yeah,
to get that
because
working.
like if you play like Spider-Man, you have him swing and then he goes on the ground and his legs have to like run across
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well as he's still.
Yeah.
Okay. So that makes
Tons of
sense.
art to get up and running.
Thank you.
So I want to, and wire, on top of wire generates this. I want this to be destroyed and the other one is.
Just put it in the child of Mega Brain.
Yep.
Can I ask you about the code?
As I increase, like,
Yes.
Not the specs.
So where are you actually spawning this in your frame generator?
Yep.
You spawn that in. So you are spawning it and your load pad spawn. Oh, you choose it.
Yes, that's integration. That's the
Okay, I mean, I have to.
Imagine this is the sword.
Oh, Wait.
What kind of holiday?
My wire generator.
Try to give it some leeway. It's not supposed to be like a fully realistic.
Which has
I think
yeah.
that's so I just like stick a straight right into it. Like it's not gonna. It's always gonna click through. So you just want to go looking up like this.
Because they're really
You know.
So when you want to do very access on you want to get something like this.
How big are you thinking the handle?
Speed is a handle, so it's right here. So you know the access.
Probably a big handle.
So, what I can do is what I
I like
can
where
do,
it's films.
you typically don't want to make it.
Yeah.
There's some better ways of doing that.
Okay.
There's something called properties or plus. So now what you do is scroll down. When you stop the call,
You just showed me the storage. That looks more rectangle.
okay, it's like a hex system. After you spawn it, so instead of this get footage which body, but there's that.
It's like two sides.
Yeah, but you know that's
This is how
Yeah, we tried.
I would say it's about like 2/3 of
Usually works.
three-fourths.
We actually tried.
Yeah,
And I got this for lunch. Yeah.
No, like I know, like I need to handle my turn like this. I'll leave a little for now. Cause like when I wanna like list my workload, it's not good because I'm not gonna animate the
No, that's a good idea.
that is not a universal figure.
Yeah.
Good so far.
Alright, so
If I want to.
Save it in the
Random talk.
I've already got the use kit.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Yeah.
Well, then you found thinking.
Yeah.
when
Oh, what? Yeah.
Already asked us.
I love how I'm constantly spamming the button. No, don't.
I decided to do something.
double that, double.
Just made this like
I
that.
actually want another two, but I don't.
Actually, I think it's
Really great, yes.
I have the product from the first day, and today is our last day of there.
Next day, next first
Little
day,
more-
when you have a
Real
problem
quick.
too. It's a cycle, it's a cycle.
Is there such a thing as like a do once in Unity?
You can't break it, so.
You can write it in code.
Yeah, and C sharps. Is
Yeah.
there such a thing as a do what?
And it will happen because we are moving.
You just have to write that
So
yourself.
that's what we're-
Every time we move.
So would it be like a condition that you set, and then you, at the end of the little, I guess it would be like,
Yeah, so you can just create like a rule. And you can go, if not, is that,
Are you gonna
do something.
Yeah.
Say it's-
Wait, is the okay? Wait. So
No,
you're using
what if I just want to set up
an array, right?
Where?
Yeah, yeah, you can do the same.
You're using an array for a train. So why not make the lily pad spawn by the same array as train?
what's your animation?
Oh, just like at the very beginning.
Oh no, I'm following. Following.
Because
When it's initialized.
Oh,
if I like
Oh, it's right here.
Pass
So it's being initialized.
and if the number of the array is greater than the certain number, it
Now I
is.
see everything.
But if I want to put it in, I want to
You know, that's what I mean. I'm gonna use the same type of array, like the same size array. In the first array, wherever there's water, in the second array, we put a lily pad. But if there's not water, we put nothing. And then it'll just leave that way.
How do I do this? Why do you need to how do you do it? Like,
because that's what I after a while.
Just add a win condition of like 100 scores.
I
Just put it like almost like that's the same when they get behind a certain like face value. They just
On another screen.
with like going to the impact of the again. Adding pressure to the first movie script.
Yeah, that's good. Cars, the Oculus for this.
That's the player.
Yeah.
You die.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So
No, I
for
didn't.
that. Yeah. For that, it's not so much you want. So you just want to set.
It's still fixed so far.
Yeah, I'm going to
Holy shit!
Probably not the right. Try to now.
What is this? What's so long?
I don't know. It should be the last time.
Your code again? Time scale should be watched. Yeah. Yep. Yep. What do you think about this?
Yeah, like
Just to like, I mean, obviously, like, I didn't make it like the fitness one, so I just wanted to apply the shape of my dog.
You can kind of crash this right through. Yeah, no, that'll look good.
Forward back. What you forward back?
You know exactly what?
This should be a minute.
Probably not. No, yeah. You do like first person cars?
Yes, so there's people are so you're like technical things on the car, and then the view is like on the side. So you're seeing both sides of the and yeah, I'm trying to make it feel good.
You see it's behind it, not it's under a certain value. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. How does your
If it's behind a certain value compared to the player's position, then you just
how do you think it's gonna feel more nice?
like logic. To make I think I make it
So typically what I do this is
But you didn't know how you actually jump, so every time I stuff it has to jump like
normally what I do for this is I turn off.
Yeah.
The first part's gonna be downstairs here.
Depending on the fucking line, usually it's going to double the gravity.
But it's gonna quite
needs gravity though.
and I was like the part which has so like the triangles in and then have the wrist have the
So I'm gonna do it right now.
so they all need matches to this
So I mean, it's really just a matter of yeah, I think it'd be like
first line up like oh yeah that way I can go down to the wrist and then the ETS
I can't think of
and then triangle because like all the kind of is this part.
I have to destroy it. I have to destroy it in like that.
Jump speed.
Yeah, probably want something more. I need to.
I just need like connect
what is jump?
So the jump is just
combine it.
Oh,
You already
draw all the
five cents from here. But I was always in time because of my regular walking
and then
so that's why I did it twice. I could have done it the other way, but I just
delete all the
yeah.
Yeah, now the problem is Sergey and I are trying to brainstorm how I'm gonna go about connecting all each other until it feels good.
So just
It's basically the
Another way is because I don't really ask anyone about the fingers.
you just have to
But just
Okay, I thought I had to change the
Okay, let's say
because I felt money
this is
was
my non-movable, like the point where it
If
stops.
I'm gonna grab you right now,
Where it
I
stops before,
would.
right?
No, maybe like
So I
that.
could match that supply
Just the overlap.
to these words,
Gravity.
delete the excess, do the same for the second row, and then before I go into triangles here.
And
I would make that serious.
Does that make sense to you? Does that work for Sarah? Because I feel like we're reducing a lot. It's not fucking you.
Oh, wait, you're gonna laugh
It's
at
not
me.
fucking you. It's not taking a lot of time. I need all of these lines for the shit.
how would this?
I also made it in the bottom because I made it like.
Huh?
No, you
Yeah,
need to
that showed us.
Okay, so
You're always actually. I see you always. You're like, and you're gonna lie. Yeah, so the ink, bruh, no, that's a lie.
Oh, you have to and if you make it easy, do your apprentices and go back to the bottom. So, I already know. I hope you feel better, Connor.
Oh.
I wish I had like the clothing library in my brain because I just can't think of anything when I'm writing.
It's in project settings.
Which
Okay, me voy al coloquio de mi hermano se va del 17. Apartamento queda solo. Me da posiblemente 9.
Oh, I don't want it. Okay, really good. Okay.
No,
So if I'm adjusting this wall for me,
You want to save me at least 2 minutes?
is there a button I can click?
Didn't show you how to sort it out.
Pero si es que yo organizo mi lugar.
Shadow the Hedgehog. En mi casa, sí, es un brillo. Sí, sí, de afuera y de ajá. Yo creo que la radio Shark. Ah. I think just for this.
Oh, wow. Wow, that feels. That doesn't sound like better. Well, but I can barely jump out. Let's just jump.
You'll have to you want to keep that.
Yeah. So where do we put this?
And then let's say from here, so like so.
Pero, o sea, ajá, no me refería de que
Ah, ya
deleting
todo.
this here,
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to continue. All right, so the next thing we look at before we bring in some other assets is we're going to take a look at our animations and see if we can fix some of the weird issues we had. You'll notice when I play the... Of course, I closed it. When I play the run animation in particular, it looks very weird. I'm going to Mega Man here and turn up speed. With root motion on, he looks okay, but you'll notice he's kind of going to the side. And if I turn root motion off, he does a lot of weird wiggling. And so part of that is basically we need to go and make sure that the import settings are correct for the animation to make sure he's not doing any weird wobbling as he's moving. So on all of the different options we have, and actually idle is also a good example, I think his feet are sliding a little bit. Yeah, when I root motion off, his feet are kind of sliding around a little. So we have some options we can turn on to prevent that slide so the character looks like he's properly rooted and actually standing on the ground. So we can look at our idle first. So down below where we turn on looping, there's a few different options. You can see we have controls for the root transform rotation, for the position Y, and for the position XZ. So we're basically controlling individually how the character rotates according to the animation, how it moves up and down, and then how it moves laterally, so forwards and back and left and right. Now, on all these options, you'll see there's these green markers that are basically telling us we can turn this stuff on because it looks like the animation is set up properly to use this stuff. The big one I'm going to change to make sure that our character is sort of rooted correctly is turning on bake into pose for these options. And also making sure that this based upon rotation is set to original. I often set these for kind of all the animations. What this is going to do is make sure the character is rotated correctly as the artist intended, which is this based upon rotation, and then baking the root transform rotation, and then position Y and position XZ, make sure that the character is planted and doesn't slide around while the animations are playing. When I hit apply, play the game again, notice as he moves around, his feet are planted on the ground now. So we can use that to kind of fine tune the animations and make sure they're playing right and they're looking the way the artist intended. Just for reference, I'll copy the settings I used for this into Discord. So I can do that for all the animations here. Without this turned on, you might find some weird stuff. I can go back to the original settings. You might find some weird stuff with the animation again, kind of sliding and the hips or feet turning strangely. You can see the character's feet are kind of sliding to the sides there. So turning this stuff on will help eliminate that behavior. Yeah, there was all that weird foot sliding. So setting these to bake the positions and rotations and making sure our root transform rotation based upon is set to original will eliminate that weird movement. And the run in particular looked really weird. Sliding around like that. So if I do the same settings here, my run settings into Discord as well. There we go. Now the character is actually pointing forward properly and animating without that weird twisting of his hips. So when you're bringing animations into Unity, the animations should be able to play exactly the way you wanted them to. If there's any issues, please come talk to me. We can take a look at fixing up your import settings to make sure that your animations are actually playing the way you want. So there's no weird foot sliding, no weird rotation in place, none of that. Now, actually, since one of the teams is kind of dealing with this, when it comes to things like weapons, there's a few different ways of doing this. For something like a gun, typically what you'll do is literally just parent the gun to the character's hands and point in the right direction. We're going to do that next term. Things get more complicated with stuff like melee weapons. So melee weapons, if it's a really simple animation, you can probably get away with just, again, parenting like a sword to the character's hand. If I go in and actually take a look at the hand here, let's go through the hierarchy. Put it on the right hand. So if I attach like a cube and just shape it like a weapon of some kind, I can kind of pair it to the hand here. You can see the rotations are very weird. I go and hit play. Let's see how it looks. Yeah, not quite holding it like a sword. But you can kind of fine tune where it sits to get close enough. But for a lot of more complex animations, there's going to be a lot of like wrist and kind of hand movement. You won't really be able to animate all that well. So in more complex systems, what they typically do is they actually animate the character and the weapon separately, and they play their animations at the same time matched up. So they can add additional motion of the weapon, like kind of flipping or turning and doing all sorts of other stuff, or if the character does things with like a knife to flip it around from like a forehand to a backhand grip, that'll be a separate animation running on the weapon, and they just kind of play in time to sync it with the character. So simple stuff you get away with parenting, but if you have really complex kind of weapon behavior and movement, you'll have to animate that separately. Same thing if you have a gun and your character is reloading it and you see the magazine pull out or like the slide being moved, that would be a separate animation that's running on the gun that's played to sync up at the same time. Okay, so we've got some animations in. I want to take some time to look at some of the other places I had kind of sent to you as sources of assets for team projects. So I'm going to go back here. And remember, this list is at the top of your 7225 all channel here. We've got the Mixamo stuff. We've got icons. Has anyone been to gameicons.net yet? Yeah, the site's great. All this stuff is free to use for, let me turn off my darker here. All this stuff is free to use for both commercial and, you know, any personal or student projects. So you can basically use any of it. All of it's nicely organized. So you can basically search for different categories and find stuff. When you're going through it, let me look at like weapons. If you haven't been here before, you can even go in and maybe you're like, okay, I like the 3 bullets, but I don't want the ammo box. There is kind of limited controls for being able to go in and actually change the parts of it as well. So it's going to have like a background, foreground. You can set all the settings here. Depending on how it's set up, you can even go in and if you're in foreground mode, you can click on this break apart paths button. And that lets you cycle through the different paths to turn stuff on and off. So maybe I just want the 3 bullets, but I don't want this big shell here. I can go turn this stuff off and leave just the bullets. You can even add, they have things like badges and little icons you can add. You're doing any sort of like status icon type stuff, so you can customize it all that way. And then when you're done, you can just click on PNG to download the PNG version of this.
Why would we download the SVG if it's like?
So for most stuff in Unity, including the UI, without a bunch of extra plugins, it doesn't handle SVG out of the box. So we usually just pick PNG for like a rasterized image, and we'll use that for our UI. If you didn't want to keep it modified for some reason, you could download the SVG and use that one. But there's no easy way just to throw like an SVG into your Unity game. So I can download our little ammo box icon here, and just like everything else, we can go and drag that into Unity. Now, one thing to keep in mind for any sort of icons you're using, if you want to use this with like your a HUD element or use it as a sprite somewhere in any sort of 2D area of your game, rather than importing this as a default texture, you'll want to switch this over to an icon. So up at the top of our file here where we've imported it, you're going to switch it from default over to the sprite 2D and UI mode. If you want to have any transparency on it, you can also control that kind of stuff over in advanced here. All the files you're going to download from gameicons.net, they're PNGs. PNGs I'm not a big fan of. Have you been given the talk about PNGs and targas yet by Jeff? Briefly? So yeah, targas are weird, or sorry, PNGs are weird. They don't actually have transparency. You'll notice when we import the file, they have a red, green, and blue channel, but they don't have an alpha. So for that reason, when we're using them for any sort of like texture work, they're not very good. For simple UI elements, they're not bad, but they don't actually have an individual alpha channel. So to go and create an alpha for this, if I want this cut out, just so I have the 3 bullets here, in the import settings under advanced, I would change this to say the alpha source instead of input texture alpha, which doesn't exist. I'm going to change this to from grayscale. And that'll actually give me transparency. So you'll have to do that for any of the gameicons.net files you bring in. If you create your own sprite in Photoshop and it has like an alpha channel, you import it as a targa, you can just use that channel instead. And I'll take a snip of this as well. So did someone ask a question? Okay. Where did I put Discord? There we go. So game icons is really useful. Just make sure you're importing those icons correctly so you can use them. You can also bring them in and modify them or kit bash them together in any way you want. You can basically do anything you want with these icons. Outside of gameicons.net, we don't really allow much 2D art to be imported or 3D art for that matter into your projects. Big reason for that is most students source a lot of their art from the same places, and that stuff stands out a lot as not being your art and kind of calls your whole project into question, which is why even more so in the final project, we don't allow you to bring in outside art because it looks like you're just kind of stealing assets from the asset store or whatever, even if they're bought legally and everything. We want to be showing off your work, not just like a level you've set dressed with someone else's nice looking art.
What about the music in general?
So music, that's kind of different. For a team project, I've actually got a link here. Actually, let's see if we can go to the site. Music, we're going to go to 5-alarm music. I know you can go, we're going to have to figure this out. I know you can go to the .com site, but the license we have is with the .ca site. And if we go here, it's blocked. And I talked to IT and they were like, it's not our fault. So we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do here.
It is. Also, 5-alarm doesn't really have that many good songs. I used it for the other course.
Yeah, okay. I haven't dug around a lot. For music and audio, basically as long as it's licensed and allows you to use it, that's okay. For music, honestly, a lot of the time when I want music for a project, I actually grab it directly from the Unity Asset Store. So if you go here and look in their audio section and go to music, and go to the free section, yeah, they've got like 499 different free music packs. There's a lot of stuff in here you can use.
Don't put Christmas.
I don't think someone would have an asset up with like copyrighted music in it for very long.
You never know. You never know.
You never know. Wham could be there.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, you can download music from the asset store. That's fine. Same thing with sound effects. From that, if you look on the network drive, I've also got a link on Discord here to this location, this VFS Storage 10 SFX library. So this is an SFX library that the sound design campus maintains. There's tons of sound effects you can use in your project in here. I like Boom Library, has lots of stuff. Boom Library, yeah. There's lots of different like impacts and shots. There's actually a bunch of ice stuff. Nice. Good playing.
So for final, we have to collaborate with people from other campuses at DFS.
You don't have to. You can. Most teams collaborate with sound designers. Some collaborate with students from like the concept art campus or digital design for additional stuff. That's kind of up to you. We will, as part of your final project near the end of term 4, you'll have a pitch essentially with sound design students. And the ones that are interested in working with you will basically sign up. Just fair warning, and this goes for team project 2. We basically tell teams that any collaborators on your project don't have as much invested in the project as you do. So always have contingencies if they don't deliver. The sound designers are usually more reliable than other students, but sometimes things fall through. So you always need a backup plan. We've even had one of the previous classes, one of the team project teams, it was like a brother of someone on the team was sort of like an amateur musician, wanted to do the music. And I remember talking to him at the end of the project. He was like, I've always been like, had a great relationship with my brother, but I want to choke him right now. He's like, I've never been so mad at him. Like he was handing in all the assets and stuff super late and it was just driving him nuts. And this was like his own brother. So yeah, it's always sort of a risk working with outside collaborators.
Oh, one more thing.
Yeah.
When we were doing Foundation, they got the sound designers to work on the film music. And one of the sound designers just took over the whole project and just changed all their music, and they didn't save it back up, so they had nothing good in the end. So you want to have a backup before you give it to them. Yeah,
I mean, that's why we use version control. We also have checks and balances in place so they can't make changes like that to your project. The other thing is about the sound designers is so they're usually pretty good at game audio. Some of them are more interested in it than others, but they're pretty much all awesome at trailer audio. So I would strongly recommend getting a sound designer to work on your trailer with you because they'll do an awesome job of that. Linear stuff, they're much more comfortable with, and they work a lot better with it than doing like interactive real-time game stuff. But in here, we have lots of different assets you can use for your audio for team project. A lot of the team projects sound kind of empty because there isn't a lot of audio there. So I'd recommend going in, just dumping in as much audio as you can. It's going to make your game look a lot better. Well, sound a lot better, but overall look better. I mentioned skyboxes before, so depending on your game, these might be useful for you. Some games will just get away with using like the built-in kind of gradient as well, especially for stylized stuff. But this is another good site. It's Polyhaven. It allows you to download skyboxes and basically just use them pretty easily in Unity. If I wanted to grab one, let's go and take a look at the wood interior. This one? Okay, we'll do the Hayloft. So on the site, you can just go and download these. They've got different options here. I usually want to go with like a EXR, and 4K is a little much. I'm going to go with the 2K. So I'm just going to have this set to 2K EXR, and I'm going to click download. Now, the reason why they offer these files, you notice these aren't JPEGs, they aren't Targas or anything like that. These EXR and HDR files actually allow them to have a higher range of light in the image, essentially, which can lead to much better lighting. Because your skybox isn't just something you see, it actually helps light and illuminate your scene. So now that we've downloaded that file, we can drag it in, and all we have to do is a little bit of changes to the import settings, and we can throw it into our scene. So just like everything else, I'm just going to import this into Hayloft 2K EXR. I'm going to import this into Unity. And we see this. Now, you'll notice this obviously looks like kind of a weird texture. We've got a bigger image of it here. This is set up to be a cube map. So it looks all weird and stretched out because it's captured in a way that it can wrap it around a sphere. So in Unity, to set this up correctly so we can actually use it as a skybox, I'm going to go in and up at the top, just where we change the texture settings, we're going to leave it set to default here, but I'm going to change the texture shape. Instead of 2D, I'm going to change this to cube. I'll leave the mapping set to auto. It usually does a pretty good job figuring out what type of arrangement you're using. And then I'll scroll down and hit apply. And it does this. Yeah. Now, if we want to use this, then we have I think the scene we set up here, we actually didn't include a volume, so we can set one up. But we can just apply this to our scene through custom post-processing. So right now, the default is this like sunlit sky HDR file that we're using. We can just swap out for the hayloft here if we go in and create a new volume. So this is the same volume we use for post-processing that we played around before. If I right-click on my scene, I can go down to volume and I'll create a... actually, you know what? Maybe... No, I don't need all that. I'll just right-click and go down to volume, and I'm going to create a global volume. We have so many default volumes in here. Oh, that'd be one. Okay. What I'll do here is, just to keep this simple, I'm just going to hit new to create a new profile, and we can add in a HDRI sky component. We're just going to drag our skybox onto that. There's our hayloft. Now it's a little bright, so we can go in and tune it. We turn on the intensity mode. We can drop down the exposure a little bit. Oh. So we can swap out whatever skybox we want in our scene fairly quickly. Now, keep in mind, unless we do some tricky stuff to kind of break the setup, that our skybox is going to light our scene. So we've had some teams that, I don't know, confusingly, they're like, okay, our game's going to be at night, like pitch black. So our sky is completely black. And then they're like, okay, where did all of our ambient light go? And we're like, well, you made the sky black. That's where the light's coming from. You should be able to figure that out. Yeah. So keep in mind when you change the skybox, it is going to change your lighting in your scene. Same thing if you want the opposite. If you want like a really bright day's sunlight, like skybox, but your scene is too bright for what you want, that's the same deal. You probably actually want a more dim skybox. Now, another thing to keep in mind is most games, you want your skybox to kind of reflect your environment. Now, typically it's outside. Having a skybox that's just like inside a building is a little bit strange. Normally, instead of using a skybox for this, we'd probably have like a reflection probe capture inside that room that would capture that room specifically. So a lot of the time, the skybox you're going to be looking for is going to be more like this kind of stuff, actually outside. Just be aware some of these is a good example. Some of them have like vehicles or people standing off in the distance, which might not be something you want in the background if you're making like a medieval game.
An Easter time travel.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, some of the environments, I'd take a good look at them and see what's in them, just in case you end up with something you don't want in the shot.
Do you know how people create these?
They actually go out there. There's special cameras that can basically shoot in different directions and then put it together into one of these images. Anyone that was at the ILM thing, this is what they do to create their 3D environments as well. They go in and scan it in different directions. There are ways to kind of procedurally generate sky, so you could go in and start with some color and like add volumetric clouds and stuff like that, but it's fairly expensive and still doesn't really look any better than a normal skybox, so I usually go for this approach. Okay. Let's see, what other asset places do we have listed? We got skyboxes, music, VFX textures. So these sites, I can't remember if I've shown you these before, but are handy. We added that sample pack when we were working with VFX to get stuff like the flip books we had for our smoke and fire. These sites are also quite good. This one, the Effect Texture Maker, can generate all sorts of different types of textures. You can even animate them if you turn that on. Basically go through. On this site, if you actually select this drop down and then hit page up and page down, it'll cycle through the different options. So there's a whole bunch of different options here for different types of effects, and you can export them as a sprite sheet at the end if you want. Some cool stuff in here.
Whoa.
Noise, what is that, clouds? Yeah. Ooh. Some of them you can even have options to do like turn on like a toon shading type thing or turn on a normal map mode to actually generate a normal map of the image. Whoa. It's supposed to be snow. I just made a snow normal map. There we go. Yeah, this is a good start for a lot of like VFX. Ooh, blood splatter and stuff. That could be good for animating it. Whoa. Trabeculum? I don't even know what that means.
It's cool as fuck. It's trippy.
So Effect Texture Maker is great. Again, all this stuff you can kind of use wherever you want. Another site is here. This is actually just from the Unity blog. I think I might have shown this one before. You can basically go in here and download just like flipbooks and sequences of all these images, either like one image, one after the other, or as a complete flipbook in one sprite sheet. You can use this for all sorts of effects. I also actually just bought, I got the commercial license, so I believe students can use it. It's like a huge pack. It's like 500 megs, but I'll probably make it available to you. It was, let me see if I can find it really quick. It was, yeah, this pack here. So I'll figure out how to make it available to you, but it's a pack of seamless noise textures that are really good for different VFX and shader work. Yeah, the price was pretty good, so I picked this up. And I was doing this partly because I'm working on a VR project right now that has to be optimized a lot. It might seem kind of backwards, but using stuff like the noise generation nodes and shader graph for like gradient or like Voronoi noise is actually more expensive than actually just saving out a texture of that noise and then sampling it. So I've been going through a lot of optimization, replacing a lot of my shader code with just these pre-made textures. These are pretty handy. Okay, couple things I actually forgot to add there. So another app we have in our computer here. Let's see if we can find it. Oh yeah, Tree It. Did I show you this? So this application, Tree It, basically allows you to customize and generate different types of trees and then export them. So you could use these in Unity. I'm not sure if any of your teams are going to really need any tree meshes, but we allow you to use this as well for generating different trees. The one thing to keep in mind is these are very, very poorly optimized, so just a few of them can be quite expensive. But if you open up Tree, it can go File, Open. You can find the templates they have, so they've got a few different ones. You can basically save these out as FBXs with their textures and use them in Engine. Oh, it's ancient.
Yeah, it looks like it, but
Yeah.
the cactus section is really
Doesn't look bad, yeah. It's clearly a tool made by a programmer. Yeah, they've got some little like daisies, and they have more. Okay, John. They have more tree-looking trees as well. So if I go open and look at, I think like the maple. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, this is total polygons, 24,000 polys for a single tree. So you got to imagine if you're making an entire forest out of these, you're going to kill your GPU pretty fast.
Just 5 trees would start.
Yeah. Just have them chase the player around so it looks like there's a forest around them at all times. Won't even notice. You can go in and try to create some like LODs by adjusting like the branch numbers and stuff like that, but it becomes pretty obvious when you start lowering this too much that it's like a different tree entirely when you're trying to replace it. It's hard to just remove branches without the person noticing. So we've got that. The other software we have, it's not on the PCs right now, but we're going to have for next term. Now, again, I don't know if anyone's going to need this, and anyone in the art stream is going to dig into it more in term 4, but there's some software called Gaia that can be used to generate terrains. And it does a much better job than you will trying to like paint mountains and stuff like that. It can be a little bit complex to use, and exporting stuff to engines a little bit tricky as well. But if anyone's doing any terrain stuff, it might be an option we can play with. Yeah, it can make some very nice looking environments. Keep in mind, a lot of these tools, the materials and stuff they use don't transfer like one-to-one to the engine. With software like Gaia, we have to set up a texture map that represent what layers you have on your terrain, and then we have to set up some stuff in Unity as well. So configuring it all can take quite a while, but the results can be very nice.
good now. Let me know if there's enough again. I'll send you my email.
Thanks, John. Yeah, Gaia has a lot of stuff for different kind of like mutations and adjusting terrain, and then adding things like water simulation through it, all this kind of stuff. It's really cool software. It's fun to play with. And again, even if you don't use it in Team Project, as part of the art pipeline classes in Term 4, you'll use Gaia for some environmental art stuff. I think that's about it. I think what we'll do is we'll take another break until, let's say, 3:05. When we get back, because I've had a lot of questions about it, we'll take a look at Fmod to sort of do a brief overview of getting audio into Unity, and then we'll wrap things up after that.
When they so good, I love it. Do you have anywhere else to recommend to get audio samples besides that?
Those are really the only places I look, is the drive and then the asset store.
Yeah.
You'll find some like audio sites, but a lot of them are kind of sketchy and their licenses aren't very explicit, so it's hard to tell if they actually own their like assets and if you're actually allowed to use them.
Yeah.
So I'd be kind of cautious about finding random stuff online.
Okay. Yeah, because I really would like to get good car sounds for our game.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like it's gonna be almost pivotable.
Yeah.
Pivotable.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure in the network drive they will have some car sounds. You might have to like modify them a little bit to make them sound more space aging.
Yeah.
But I think you'll find stuff.
All right. Thank you.
Well, it's not good for I wish, but I'm good for it.
So like now it's time to grab. Now it's time
Cards
to
get improved. Cards just that you'll really come.
And also like
Your competitors finished their
so
and you're still playing Minecraft.
Yeah.
Controls
Yeah.
Yeah. Like what the fuck? Like
fuck. And now I'm gonna
why you don't reply?
My points are fine on their own.
Holy shit.
I'll just give you a hit.
Use the accelerator?
Yeah.
Is he gonna be your girl?
again, they just go and
Oh, you can break his Oh, congratulations! Christmas gift!
But then this one should
what's your
I just
What you doing, Chris?
it is your fucking
Yeah.
Oh, you
What?
started this 3 days ago.
Make it good.
For me, it was really fast. Oh yeah, well it's been out.
Why you know the That's how we're gonna play games.
Dude!
That's kind of what
Finish your game.
I'm gonna send them a project and say, yeah, make it better.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
What the fuck's going on?
So good.
and this doesn't work when it's que esa función de que cuando genere sea así como
Yeah.
pero si no
Yeah. Well, not yeah. Start sliding up. Yeah. Constant. With how bad the physics felt, this is such a big thing.
what do you mean it feel good?
I'm also
Well, it feels a little
faster. Yeah, I wanna match it like village.
What is the
Yes. Village.
Alright.
Did you see
Mark.
Oh,
4:30.
finish? Look it up.
Does that work? I gotta collect the.
Snap. 4:30 for
What does this mean?
Yeah, I posted in the Discord. I guess.
You can play.
And when you're done
What is this?
Don't even be. Don't touch that.
Oh, this is like this project I'm like putting.
Why are my numbers not skipping?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's why I should have bring it here. Yeah. So I'm just trying to.
I think the bigger one is the.
I found
When
you.
they're
You need it.
probably just gonna get that one. This.
Okay.
Oh,
Ready? What's
Yes,
up?
I'm
Using a powerful processing filter with pre-phase reflection that goes
Yes, yes.
He's right here.
video lag.
Videojuego.
Video lag.
Let's go. Wait, okay. Wait. You're finish your PowerPoint. Oh, dude, like this is the problem. I need to play this yours too. It's only 3 hours. It's only 3 hours. Picture here, picture there. A little bit of text. That's it. Yeah, it takes 10 minutes. Oh, we're collecting cats. What's that? Oh, shit. I thought that was the cats. Give me all the cats.
It's sort of like that, except you have to actually hand-place the roads. There is
Why is it keep over?
Yeah, no,
Yeah. It sounds like really I mean, you lose.
yeah.
It's literally you lose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I have walls.
You learn the UI from the.
Yeah, but I made it with. So there's gonna be like actual.
Everything else. Because my tutorial has a UI built in. So I'm just following that.
Was that a manga?
Oh, it's one.
It has a game over, but I don't think it has amazing.
I just made a thing. It's last spring, then like
Well, that's if it has like a high.
you have your bottle and what else you have the same. You should have a loader at your sample thing. Yeah, and in the bottom you will put as
Omar,
the thing loader and then what you want to do.
how's it feel being the prodigy?
And the thing loader has the
Hard? Your heart?
has the methods to do the same to get in the machine or yeah.
To make it game loader script.
Yeah.
I'll say you just follow the last script.
Yeah. Because see the
I'll follow that tutorial.
yeah. I mean, you don't have to follow.
Follow the video.
You're not worried, like,
There might be.
or you just doing this to
I
practice?
see, I see.
Again, one.
Just engage the prime interface.
Okay. So then you're gonna redo it?
No, I don't
Or there's a new technique.
Right? So, what do you mean?
Dynamic single win.
Walk through. Okay.
Yeah. I made dinosaur game.
What?
Cars, I did.
And why do you
This is Chinese.
He said that I only follow it tutorial.
Oh,
There's no players now.
Car spawner.
is that the camel on your pants?
It didn't only get off.
it's restricted.
When you drill it, the camel. It is actually sick. I noticed in stage you learn like that's a camel.
He's not a bunch.
Why? What are you supposed to do? I didn't. I don't care.
You can make mini panels. I just have to make a die for
So, I'm making GTA.
I'm trying to
I think it's good.
like
Oh, you
spawn items inside on top of this.
very far.
Like this is dude, it keeps squares 1 unit wide, and when there's unspawn here, they transform themselves.
So these movie triggers.
Yeah, it long.
That's interesting.
So good. I gotta.
And my game is open.
Yep. Where are you spawning?
It's on wire 3.
Your scale is set.
On my wire 3. Okay, how do I
Game object, fun.
You do it using ProBuilder and then make the scale. See, because you're spawning that cube with the scale of 21.
Yeah.
That's why it looks so big.
Alright.
You are looking for a 1:1 square.
Yeah.
Your 4 cubes spawn 5.
Yeah,
That's what's happening. You have to figure out the logic to get that to work correctly.
Okay. Pro builder.
I think that's the best way. Look at it.
Okay.
And then save that as like prefab. It's more like spell.
Yeah.
Cool.
Or
Yeah, right click to hold projectile. That means to release it. Which is weird because before I just saw that it was like it took but it was deleting them. I released it on
Which is on Steam again.
I got it.
Oh, okay.
So it's a PvP game where it's off object. So that like
What?
yeah.
Okay. You're like trying to.
Yeah.
Red doesn't.
I put you know what? You're on recruits. Oh wait. Yeah.
It would be, once you got like.
Then I posted yeah.
This is a lot like have you played
Well, he does have multiplayer though.
You know the custom game mode console one?
Oh, it's something like that, yeah.
It's something.
It's kind of like an
you do.
I have multiplayer, but the yeah.
Oh, okay.
Once you get good at the movement, you can move so great. What? What's this?
I would increase the range so that I'm
Yeah.
a bit of leeway.
Oh, it's not good.
Pretty good
Oh.
so far.
Oh wait, no.
What would be cool
Okay,
is if
sorry.
you got like a wall that's sitting in the middle. That's
What? Yeah, I do want
Almost just shooting each other.
I want to do like different game modes, like stuff like that. Like adding football with sports.
Oh,
Yeah, no, right. Yeah, like specifically like that. I could go to like a bathroom.
It's basically have you ever watched Avatar? Remember the sport that they did in that episode where they did sport?
Yeah, static. That's the same for everyone. Okay. The blue people play the sport.
no, the other avatar.
The blue people play the sport. The other avatar.
What? That's impossible. You want to pick, so you want to enable
Oh,
Set off.
Yeah. So when you
you're
unlock
making
it,
it sound. That makes
Yeah.
so
Which one again?
Hardly any
Okay. Okay. Let's try.
it's another function that you can just add on.
Yeah.
It's one function before
What's the gameplay? Yeah.
The gameplay
It was working, and then I tried to start finding something new.
like basically build houses.
So,
More houses. Yeah, but it's always
yeah,
and then you wind up not
just do house for now.
Sounds interesting. Kind of overscope for you.
a lot of things will start with more houses.
Or like,
Yeah, I'll finish it today. That's good. I'm gonna do like a really slow version of it.
Oh no, yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna have like it's just gonna go to requirement for game
Game object?
the screen.
It was just taking us to the screen. You game test.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah,
And you love it. Like, you know,
no, it's
Same for Bounce Samurai.
I'm down for that.
You want to check them out?
Okay, sure. Try the movement. Let me know how it feels.
Oh yeah.
You're actually really responsive.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, okay. Most of the time. Most of the time.
How does that feel?
Oh, I see why the camera is so fucking.
Yeah, I can see both sides.
Omar.
See how good that is?
I'm gonna start it model.
How does it feel?
Do you need to I like the drum. I like all of them.
I made it a fist so that because we don't have to have any walking.
It's responsive.
I don't have any. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought you
Yeah. I'm gonna take this so you can use all your brains.
Oh, next time I'm using the.
Next time I delete your key.
And then you respond at the beginning.
That'd be a good excuse. That'd be a good excuse. Oh well, Pradeep do you.
Did you turn anything?
Let's see what I can do. I and probably like that's just a strategy.
Give me a while. I saw art video. Yeah. So I made this.
I don't know.
This. So it's
Overall, it's overscooped into one. But I'm not 100% on like
by then, right? They have a better idea of the actual work of the art. Is it just like
the amount of assets and the kind of assets too. So like you don't want to have too many characters because
So right now, that's half the general movement, I have the cars. If I want something to happen, so I can hit by a car, like I was using the like
doing like punch
sound okay right now, then I go
making
flying up.
robots.
Is that a different script? It's just put into the programming on this.
So it's like it depends on what your art style is. Are you using a lot of gaps like or
And that is like a car, and something make the car publish.
So as long as it's a car,
these are techniques
Yeah, I
that
got
take
it.
away from the art.
So I'm
Combine
collecting,
it with more
you
So I don't know what
yeah, I do this stuff.
Because like right now I have strings on my bridge and body.
No, no,
I want to have
Yes.
Okay. So right now the base car has
So yeah, let's set up the first 7 layers. Now make sure that you get
for somebody not to get now, yeah,
I just heard that the
take car tank position,
Let's get the story going.
and then that's good. You should be able to see it, but like I guess
Sorry.
Senior.
Yeah, but I
so
don't
in that
We're gonna be using a modified version of this.
the last one.
But you'll still, well, like, there's no extreme.
No section, it's just gonna be.
Just bones for colors. And one is a main layer, which I basically
Actually, sorry, there was one thing I actually wanted to ask you about.
What's that?
If I want to switch feedback,
I wonder how I got into this.
so right now I
But
actually have
if
cars.
the
I actually have buses too. If I want to sometimes be buses or sometimes be cars, do I just do a random number between 1 to 10? If it's between 7 to 10, it will be a bus. If it's between less than 6, so is that a good way to do it?
Yeah, I mean, what I would probably do is have like an array where you plug in the car or bus for the paths,
Okay.
and then generate a random number to select
So,
a random one.
random number.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna continue. So our next part, we're going to talk about audio, because I've had a lot of questions about Fmod. People are very afraid of Fmod. It's a great piece of software. It makes working with Unity a lot easier. Working with audio with Unity a lot easier. I know at least one person does, but who has experience with audio stuff? Do any people? I see like one hand up. Cool. So basically what Fmod is, it's a middleware software. So basically it's something we add on to Unity to play our audio. We don't use any of the built-in Unity audio. While it sounds like extra work, it's really nice because it handles a lot of stuff we'd have to otherwise code ourselves. Things like having random audio trigger, say we're shooting a gun, we don't want to hear the same shoot sound every time. We might want to play like a random clip from a list. We could code all of that, or Fmod can do it with absolutely no code at all. The nice thing about that is it allows us to set it up quickly, and that our audio designers, whoever's on our team working with audio, can go in and change all this stuff behind the scenes, and we don't have to touch our code or our game. They can just update how our sound works. So there's a lot of cool options we have with Fmod. Specifically too, it doesn't really matter now, but if you're going to be doing a local co-op type game, think of like Mario Kart, something with split screen locally. Unity systems out of the box can only have one audio listener in the scene, so you can't be listening to multiple positions at the same time. Fmod, they have their own listener component, and you can put as many of them as you want in your scene. You can have each car with its own listener, so you can hear kind of local audio for each player at the same time. So it's got some cool functionality that Unity doesn't have as well. Now, the tricky bit, to get audio working in Unity, we need to import it into Fmod and configure it. And then we do what's called building a bank. And from the bank, we can play audio from the bank in Unity. So to open up our Fmod project, the way the template's set up, it actually already has an Fmod project ready to go with some sample stuff inside of it. You'll even find in Unity, we already have some sample content ready to go. If you want to play audio in any of the scenes, I can create a new empty game object and add something called an Fmod Studio Event Emitter. It's got a very long name. This thing allows you to select any of the audio in the project. Right now, we have a bunch of UI stuff in here for props. We have some dialogue here. Let's do the Yoda speech. And I can tell it to go on object start. And one sec. It's getting attenuated.
He is too old. Yes, too old to begin the training.
So rather than having to worry about audio in our project and audio sources and all this stuff, we can just play audio through these event emitters. They have some other cool stuff where we can even hook up audio to specific physics events. So if we just need like impact sounds or hit sounds from characters bumping into things or hitting the ground, or vehicles crashing into each other, we can set that stuff up with basically no code as well. So I added this Fmod Studio Event Emitter. And under Event, if you click on this little search button, you can see all the audio in the project. Could also be this music that you will get very, very sick of. The default music Yes, so another thing I like about Fmod, so there are a few different middleware that work with Unity. Another popular one is called Wise. One of the big reasons I like Fmod versus Wise is Unity has a mute button right here to turn audio on and off. Sorry, the one on the game view. If I click that, it turns the audio off, so Fmod actually listens to the Unity mute setting, which I really like. That's not saying you should have your audio muted all the time. I've seen teams that have really bad audio bugs, and they never notice it because all the programmers go and mute their audio so they don't listen to it. So you should still be checking in with that stuff, especially once you start putting audio in. But yeah, when you're hearing the same 10 seconds of the same song over and over and over again all day, you kind of lose your mind.
If we're working
Yeah.
at home, we have to install Fmod from somewhere.
So if you're working on home on audio stuff, yes. If you're not touching any audio stuff, all the banks and the files get carried with it, and they'll still play in the editor just fine. It's only if you're going to be modifying audio. Yeah, that's actually a good question. If you need to install Fmod at home, you can go to their site. If you go to download, it's going to make you sign in first, but you can just make a free account and you can download Fmod. the version we're going to be using, come on, autocomplete. There we go. Really? Okay. The version we're going to be using, I believe, is the latest. We're just updating it. It's this version right here. Yes, 202.19. That's the version you'll be using at home. And here as well. Now, if you want to open Fmod and start working with it, as I mentioned, the Fmod project is already added to our Unity project. So if we either go through Fork or through our File Explorer or go through Unity, for example, I can right-click on Assets and go Show in Explorer. You'll find this Fmod folder, and it has the Fmod project inside of it. So it lives inside of your repository. All the Fmod stuff gets copied over when you clone the repository. And inside of it, you can, oh, is it not associated? Well done, IT. Okay. So at home, if you install that, that'll be fine. Otherwise, we can open up Fmod, and we can go navigate to that file. So if we go open, we can go find that. And here's the project. So Fmod, the interface is fairly simple at the start. You can dig down into much more complex stuff. It's kind of stylized to look like old school like DAC setups for working with audio. Look at any of the audio. I can go see our board and all of our adjustments and stuff that get added to it. We're going to go into Fmod in more detail next term. We're going to, in our code classes, we're going to go through the process of setting up a brand new Fmod project and integrating it into the project we're working on. We're also going to go through and set up a bunch of audio and play it sort of on the code side of things. And then we're going to have a dedicated audio lecture from Dieter, who's our sound design instructor. He's going to come in and talk about kind of audio sourcing, how to cut up audio and bring it into Fmod and do all that stuff for Team Project. Don't stress about audio stuff in Team Project right off the bat. We don't ask for, it's a little bit delayed, but we don't ask for any audio stuff until alpha, because we know you haven't had all the classes on audio stuff yet. So for the first milestone, the prototype, we don't expect any audio in your project at all. It can be totally silent, and that's fine. If you want to cut up any audio you find and start playing around with it, the software we have on the PCs and what I recommend you use at home is Audacity. So it's free software. You can go in, drag in audio, and you can cut it up and export it and do all that stuff. Well, okay, sure. Skip the upgrade. So you can do all that stuff from Audacity. So you can basically cut up the audio in any way you want, export it, and go drag it into Fmod and start setting things up. For voice stuff, as Glenn mentioned before, he voices a lot of our Team Project games, so reach out to him if you want like an announcer or narrator or anything like that. Other than that, if you want to record your own audio for use, we do have an audio booth down on the second floor. Does anyone know where it is? Yeah. So when you're going into like the 201 classroom there, it's right on the right-hand side. You'll see like the on-air light that flashes up top. You can go to the recording booth and go record audio in there. So you can do Foley and voice acting and all that kind of stuff in that room. You can record it and then export it and use it in your project. So for bringing audio stuff into your project, since we are using Fmod, one thing to be aware of is you don't need to actually import. You might have done this for like your current Unity project stuff. We don't actually need to import any audio into Unity itself. We import all of the audio directly into Fmod. What it actually does, if you look in the folders, is when you import stuff, it has its own little assets folder where it imports all that audio and keeps track of the files for you. Now, as I mentioned, one of the really cool things about Fmod is the ability for it to use different sorts of tracks. I'm going to find, yeah, these are good examples. So normal SFX that just sort of fires off one value. Let me find a good example here. course, I can't find a simple piece of audio. Ah, here we go. So these are really simple pieces of audio. So something like the button, mouse over, take a little click. You can barely hear it. There we go. Beautiful. So you can play just simple audio through it. But it has these things called multi-instruments that are really useful. So a good example would be the... Here you go, this aluminum can crunch. So this one, if I hit play... Oh my god, it's so quiet. Here we go. Here's a good example. So it's actually got 4 different audio clips inside the same little event. So on the Unity side of things, when we go play this, it's going to pick a random clip from this multi-instrument, they call it, and play it for us. Now you can do different things. You can like weight them differently, so you can have certain audio play more than others, but it kind of handles all that randomization for us, which is really nice. We don't need to worry about doing any of that stuff over on the Unity side. It gets more complex with things like the footstep. It actually has parameters you can change. So if I hit play, we can hear it plays a random footstep sound on solid wood. But it has these parameters up top we can change. So it's got different options for default is... Hard to hear, one sec. Got some like wet mud, hollow wood, solid wood, another one, and oh yeah, wet sand again. So we can send different parameters from Unity over to Fmod, and it automatically selects this stuff. And again, it's really nice for working with sound designers. So we can just say, okay, you know, wet sand is 0, hardwood is 1, hollow wood is 2. We can give it different values, and they can set all that stuff up for us. Another good example is stuff like the ambience track here has a bunch of stuff going on. It can change different basically parameters on the track using stuff, even like whatever scene you're in currently. As it changes, it'll play different ambience in the background. So we can hook up all sorts of really cool stuff, and it kind of handles switching between different ambiences and music and audio all in the background. Again, without a lot of thought on our side, which is nice. If you want to use some of these, a good example here would be, let's go into, I'm going to go to a different scene. If I go into scenes and look in the 3D platformer scene, I've got my character here, and I believe these cubes are already set up for some audio. Yes. So these little cubes here, these ones, this small one and actually this big one, have a Fmod collision emitter component added to it. So you can set up different audio, one for enter, for basically when you enter collision with something, and then one for stay when it's being dragged. And you can change some values here, basically clamping how fast it can be moving when it gets hit, and how often it'll repeat to automatically add collision sounds to stuff in your game. And I don't have to script any of this. This component's just ready to go. Here, let me go in, and I think this is very quiet.
Can you mute your game scene?
I turned it off. I can still hear my footsteps. Yeah, I think it's just the footsteps are a lot louder than the collision. Let me fix that really quick.
So you edit the sound values in Fmod.
Yes, so I can go for mattress collision, enter, and stay. Their volumes, oh, their actually volumes are turned down a whole bunch. Let's go and fix that. This is a good question. Who knows how the decibel scale works? What type of scale is it? Yes, it's a logarithmic scale. So every 10 increments, I just went from -20 to -10. That is going to double the volume of the impact. There we go. Now I can hear it better. So all that thudding coming from the box moving around, that's just coming from that collision event emitter. So I can add that all really easily. I don't have to code anything. It's just ready to go. Now we have some systems in place to detect what surface you're standing on. Notice I have like the gross kind of like wet, mushy mud sound down here, and it switches to hardwood up top. Yeah.
Does this work with 2D as well?
Yep. Yeah, it's all configured to work with 2D stuff. So Fmod is really handy. I've been playing around with some more of its kind of more detailed features recently. I'm working on a little like rhythm-based VR app kind of thing. It's got cool stuff so you can hook up little beat markers to songs. So I think this one, oh yeah, actually this one has one built in already. So it's got a little beat marker here. So it's 120 BPM using like a 4/4 timing. And it can actually send beat events over into script in Unity. So I've got it set up so I can play a track and listen to that beat response. And then I have like VFX and lights and stuff responding to the beat. So there's all sorts of cool scripting integration that they have available. Good example of that would be something like, some people here have played Hi-Fi Rush. No one? This game here?
Try and catch this.
So a good example in this game, you can hear everything going along with the beat, including like props and stuff in the background pulsing. So you can hook that up really easily with some events, listening to the top beat that's playing. And as your track changes as well, it'll change when the beat signal is being sent. You can have all that stuff reacting to the song.
And now, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, the lights on the floor too. Yeah. Yeah, so all this is pretty easily doable through Fmod. What's interesting about games is we kind of neglect audio a lot of the time. But if you look at a lot of the top sellers on Steam, most of them have a great soundtrack tag added to them.
Yeah.
So it's something that you might not notice a lot just while it's, a game has pretty good audio. But as soon as that goes missing, the game's going to feel and sound a lot worse. So having kind of proper audio to make your game feel more alive is really important. So as I mentioned, we'll deal more on like the code side of Fmod and how to place downs in our own custom code more next term. But I wanted to give you sort of a brief overview of what Fmod looks like in case anyone wants to try playing around with it. But again, please don't spend your entire Christmas break just kind of getting ahead on Team Project. I don't want you all kind of stressing over that stuff when you should be relaxing a bit and recovering and getting ready for the next term. We still have a bit of time left. Are there any questions your group has about Team Project? Any concerns? Not yet? A good answer. Yeah, definitely future problem. Team Project, as I've said before, it's really more of a learning experience than focusing on making a really good game. I'm honestly hoping you'll make mistakes because you'll learn a lot more from making mistakes than accidentally doing the right thing the first time. Ideally, I say you'll learn from your mistakes quickly and you won't make the same mistakes again, but I was sitting down with some of the 71s and saw they were doing the same dumb stuff they were doing for their final project they did on their team project. So sometimes that takes, a few screw-ups in a row to really land, but it's an important part of the learning process. Next term, our team project class is going to start it's always on Wednesday, so it's going to start Wednesday morning. As I mentioned before, we're there all day, so at both blocks, Wednesday morning and afternoon, we'll be there for team project. In general, it's going to be more lecture in the morning and work period in the afternoon. I'm hoping that's what we'll do for the first class. In the morning, we'll kind of get situated, we'll get our projects cloned and everything set up. And we'll do, the project's going to look a little bit different. I've kind of updated and improved a few things. So we'll take a look at what's changed there. And we'll talk a little bit more about some more advanced Git stuff and kind of working together in Git in a team. And we'll also figure out, we've got a pretty big group this time. Normally, I like to be able to get the GDs and the PGs in the same room for kind of lecture stuff, but I think there's what, 28 of you and 11 PGs, so it's a pretty big group. I'm not sure if we're all going to fit. But we'll figure that out on Wednesday. My Unity 2 class, I haven't gotten our schedule yet for next term. Normally, I like it to happen before our team project class because there's kind of some nice code, kind of background and head start I can give you. But we'll see how that lines up. I'm hoping with, I think 11 of your class are in the coding stream and there's 11 PGs, which means we should be able to fit everyone in the same room for those classes. So next term, I might reach out to your class and ask for some volunteers to allow PGs to use your PCs while we're in our coding classes. I'm not going to force anyone to do that, but if I can get some volunteers, that would be good. I'll probably reach out next term about that. Just makes it easier if everyone's in the same room. If there aren't any questions, I think we'll wrap things up a little bit early today. I know you've had a pretty hectic week catching up on all your team project stuff. I'll stick around for any questions you guys have, and I'll get the recording from today uploaded, and I'm going to send the whole playlist because I know some of the PGs wanted to see what we were working on as well. But yeah, I think if there's nothing else that's pressing, we'll wrap things up for today.
Thanks, bud.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.